Hello everybody, my name is David. Thank you for watching Crazy Narcissist Ex-Girlfriend. I make this video today because it seems like most of us in this community who have experienced relationships with narcissists and other people with personality disorders are suffering, and usually what it is this, C-PTSD. So I'm going to try and go over, there's so much information on this, guys, that I have, so I can't cram it all in one video, and I don't want to, but I just couldn't stop I had to write it down. I just wanted to keep giving you guys as much information as possible because this is the key. Awareness. If you don't know what's going on, that's so much more stressful. Okay, so imagine like a panic attack or anxiety attack or even just anxiety. If you don't know what that is, it's so much worse, isn't it? And if you know what that is, then at least you know what's going on. Okay, but the important thing is to know why. If you know why, it's even better. So PTSD or C-PTSD, it's not just knowing what it is, but knowing why. Why do you have it? And that's the key to unlocking happiness in your future. Healthy, happy relationships. So let me just go over some things for you guys to think about, to ask yourself, see if you can relate to some of these things, okay? Don't forget, I call this post-traumatic stress response, because I don't believe it's a total disorder. This is easy to fix. It's not something that is so hard to fix like a personality disorder. And also know that this comes from the same place as borderline, ADHD, stuff like that. It's childhood trauma. Childhood trauma is very difficult to identify. We tend to not remember, or it's fears that we kind of have a phobia of. We've built a phobia of over time because we didn't want to think about it. So see if any of this kind of relates to you guys. So C-PTSD, this will make people, and it doesn't mean you will, but the addictions to drugs and alcohol, work, sex, things like this is a big response to this. It's how people live their life a lot of times that are suffering from this. Eating disorders is very common. Promiscuity, sex, anxiety, depression, overreacting, hypervigilance, villainizing people, catastrophizing, isolation, alienation, estrangement, memory lapse in your childhood. And you might sometimes have felt in your childhood or even now, you might have felt like you're floating around. Sometimes you may feel like you're looking at yourself from outside, kind of an out-of-body experience. You might feel like you're in a movie. Sometimes people say they look out the window and everything looks like a cartoon, kind of. And another symptom would be really thinking that everyone, in this particular thing, is everyone's a narcissist. So everyone is villainized, everyone seems bad, the whole world seems bad, and you're like, oh my God. So that's not just because you found out you've been betrayed by a narcissist, it's also a reaction to trauma. We tend to think that everyone's either good or bad, and usually bad, right? So basically, PTSD would be a single traumatic event, where C-PTSD would be chronic trauma over years, even decades. Okay, so it's basically the child out of sync with the parent in some way or another, and I'll get to that later. It's the feeling you can't get away from the person of power that we are attached to, and another big one is the expectation that the caregiver will not comfort them, but only dysregulate them even more. It's that expectation. It's built into the child to expect the worst, okay, from their caretaker. Attachment trauma. I made a video about attachment styles. I highly recommend watching it. But this type of attachment, we attach ourselves to our parents. We start at 1 year old. And if that attachment, we attach to our parents or our caregivers over emotional needs, the ones who provide emotional needs, not just physical needs. So we aren't too concerned, and we don't attach ourselves with caregivers that supply our, food, water, shelter, things like that. We attach ourselves to our caregivers that supply emotional needs, the ones that comfort us, okay? So if your attachment at 1, 2 years old is a lot of trauma in that, you now have attachment trauma, and that will surface again later, okay? Now, the biggest, worst thing, I think, obviously there's hitting and all kinds of abuse, but neglect. Neglect is horrible abuse. When we're children, when we're babies, serve and return is so important. I made a video about this called Neurogenesis. I highly recommend watching that one. Matter of fact, all my videos on C-PTSD is in a playlist called Healing C-PTSD. So I have all kinds of videos in there on things you can do to heal this stuff, okay? But serve and return. A baby coos and caws, ooh, ah, right? And they point and whatever. And the parent's job is to return that, to acknowledge it. So that kind of neglect adds major stress to the child. The worst thing is now the caregiver is now, his source of dysregulation is the caretaker. And when the caretaker dysregulates the child but doesn't repair their mistake, that's damaging. So, mothers, fathers out there, we make mistakes, but we fix them. Even with babies, we go back and comfort them if we stress them out. We don't just leave them there, That's neglect, okay? So, very, very important, this kind of serve and return with a baby, this connection, okay? What happens when a child is left alone and major stress over years and years and years, and they expect they expect the worst from their caregiver. They know that caregiver won't be there for them sometimes or all the time. Is what happens, I call it a fear cage. So that massive stress causes a child to not know what to do. They cannot escape. They cannot get out. They are in a cage of constant fear. So what happens? What do we do as human beings? We do something called dissociating. Okay? Dissociating. A lot of us do it, probably maybe all of us do it to some degree. It's a spectrum. So dissociating would be anywhere from just simple daydreaming all the way to disorders, to dissociative disorders, okay? Like I said, daydreaming would be a way to kind of step out of reality. So we step out of that fear cage by dissociating, and we leave a part of ourselves to deal with that pain and that trauma and that fear. And we go about our daily lives, and we are able to function for the rest of our lives, kind of, okay? What it's about is that window of tolerance. So all of this is too much emotions. It's not regulating our emotion. It's not in control of our emotions, okay? We have action systems, and that's what I was talking about later when we leave a part of ourselves to deal with things. So we have different action systems, and one action system is responsible for our defense, okay, or to take care of us, to protect us, to watch out for us. We have another action system that takes care of our daily interactions and our daily lives, okay? Dissociating, what it means is when a child dissociates, they are not integrating these two, okay? And what happens is one causes a phobia of trauma about the other. So they create, over time, there's a phobia of that trauma. And there's also a fragmentation of yourself. That's why sometimes you don't feel like your whole self, okay? Now, I want you to know dissociating doesn't mean you're crazy, okay? It's just a simple defense coping mechanism. It's to protect us. So a lot of times my clients, when I tell them that they're dissociating, they'll say, well, is that bad? Am I going to be okay? Am I going crazy? No, that's why you do it. It's to be okay, okay? This is to make you okay, and this is how you survived. But there's problems with it, and now you're experiencing these problems, and I'll tell you what they are and why. What happens when a child builds himself up into a hyper-arousal state? They're worked up, okay? Oh, yeah, and borderlines do that when they rage and stuff like that. But when you dissociate, you switch over to a hypoarousal state where your metabolic rates drop, your metabolic energy drops. And when you're in that hypoarousal state, what happens is we feel helplessness and hopelessness. These are things that make us stay in these relationships, okay? These are things that make us stay because we just feel like we can't do anything. We cannot escape, okay? Borderlines go into this, and that's why they cut. So what they're doing is they don't feel like their whole self again. They've been dissociating so much that they feel so fragmented. So they will cut to feel whole again, to bring themselves back to this, to bring them back into their sympathetic nervous system, okay? And that's why they get aggressive. And that's what the rage does. So a good way to start, if you are fragmented, you want to feel whole again, a good way to do that is to be aggressive, be violent, attack somebody. I hope that makes sense. It kind of makes you feel like you're whole, okay? Another thing we do is when we split ourselves like that and we make one, class action, work action, deal with something, and then we go about our daily lives with another, and they aren't integrated, these are some of the problems we have. We have problems with self-perception, how we look at ourselves. And maybe this part that our defense system that's dealing with all the pain and stuff overreacts, and they'll do something bad, and then the other part of ourself will feel ashamed of it. So we're actually creating shame of ourselves in our own lives by doing this, okay? Another problem it comes into is relationships with others, just relating with others. We have an insecure attachment, and then the other part of us is inflexible defense system. So here's our insecure attachment, here's that defense system, and it won't budge. It will not be flexible. That's a problem, okay? In relationships with others, we need to be flexible. We need to trust, okay? The other problem is meaning in life. So one of us will have a negative view, or one part of us have a negative view, the other part has a positive view. What if that makes sense or rings a bell with you guys at all? The biggest problem with dissociating is once you do that, once that child dissociates, it stops processing all information from the outside world. It stops. Boom. Done. And that's a problem. Okay? Attachment trauma will surface again in multiple relationships, in emotional relationships. It keeps surfacing and surfacing. Okay? And what happens in our relationships in the future is shame sets in. Because what comes with trauma? Shame. Lots of shame. We feel bad about ourselves. In that trauma, in our childhood, when we were neglected and didn't get the care and stuff we needed, we associate that with shame, that we're a bad person. And when we get into future relationships and that attachment trauma surfaces again, okay, because it's so high emotions, we can't handle our emotions, it's hard, that shame sets in again. We feel ashamed of ourselves again, and we dissociate, okay? And that's where that helplessness and hopelessness sets in, and we don't leave, okay? Now, what can we do? Now, I have clients, and when I talk to them about, traumatic childhood and things that they're afraid of and don't want to talk about, I'll notice sometimes I kind of lose them. So I'll lose their attention. They kind of just fade out, get quiet, stuff like that. And that's usually because they're dissociating, because the pain, here we are, we're going to bring it up again. They're scared of it. They're scared. They're saying, I can't handle my emotions. Oh no, dissociate, because that's what we're used to doing when we're a child. So that's what we handle it as an adult. So I'm going to bring you back to your childhood, and now you're going to start to dissociate. But what you can do is what's called grounding techniques. So just think of, if we're dissociating with the here and now, try to associate yourself back into the here and now. You can do this with textures. You can do this with smells and tastes. Looking at things, focusing on things, what you're wearing, touching, feeling. All these things brings you in the here and now, and it's not so scary. So you don't really have to, if the feelings are getting too overwhelming, because what we need to do, guys, is start regulating our emotions. We need to be in control of our emotions, because when you do that, it is so empowering. Once we realize that we are in control, we're empowered. We feel like we're in control, okay? Best way to do this is to find somebody that you can talk to, okay? Talk therapy, insight therapy can be very beneficial. And if you have extreme dissociative disorders, you're going to need something like affect regulation therapy, more extensive, okay? You don't need to fear your past anymore. It's already happened. You can handle these emotions now. You can go back and handle them, I promise. There's nobody that I've met or known or helped that can't. Once you tell your brain, it's okay, it's already happened, that person can't do anything to you anymore, this will never happen to you, it's already happened, okay? So just tell yourself, I can handle these emotions, because that's what we need to do, is start regulating, start being in control of our emotions, okay? Sign of childhood trauma is fear of talking about your childhood, right? Or feeling uncomfortable to do it. That is a sign that you need to. Pain serves a purpose. Pain tells us that we need to fix something, okay? We can't ignore pain, okay? What we need to do is go back, talk about your trauma, talk about these things, talk about your shame, so you can close that chapter of your life and move on, Okay? We need to move on, guys, because this will keep coming back. That's what it's doing. It's coming back in your relationships, okay? What's going on is you have the hippocampus is a part of your brain that's responsible for emotions and memory, new memories. That is deflated. So much emotions have made it deflated. It's not creating new memories. So you need to create new memories. It's called neurogenesis. Best way to do that? Meet new people, go to new places, and do new things, okay? So start pushing yourself, start totally learning about this so you can hold it in your hand, so you can look at it, so you know why you feel this way, and then start learning things you can do, okay? So you can have a quality life, a better daily life, and better relationships with people, okay? Because if you don't fix this, if you aren't aware of what's going on, you can't fix it. If you don't work, you can't fix it. There's nothing to be scared of, you guys. Nothing. People can handle emotions. We all can. It's just we build this fear up that we can't. Okay? Nothing's going to happen. We can do this. Okay? By learning about your childhood trauma and childhood past fears and stress like that, it's how we learn how to do it in our adult life. We learn how to handle it in our adult life. Okay? I'm going to make more videos about this. I promise. I'm not done. But keep learning. You guys keep learning. Keep asking me questions if you want. I'll answer any questions you guys have. Okay? And don't forget, love yourself first. Talk to you later, guys. Bye-bye. Thank you. Danny Dog Productions.